I never thought much about walking home alone until the night Felix offered to walk with me. We'd been working the closing shift together at the coffee shop for about 3 months, and honestly, I'd gotten pretty good at pretending I wasn't completely aware of every single thing he did. The way he'd push his dark hair back when he was concentrating on a latte, how he'd hum under his breath during the slower hours, the little crease that appeared between his eyebrows when he was counting the register. It was a Tuesday night, almost 11:30, and we'd just finished mopping the floors and wiping down all the equipment. The manager had left an hour earlier, trusting us to lock up, which had become our routine. I was exhausted, my feet aching in my sneakers, and all I wanted was to collapse into bed. I grabbed my jacket from the back room and headed toward the front door where Felix was already waiting, keys in hand. That's when I noticed him looking out at the street with this concerned expression. Our coffee shop sat right on the edge of what everyone called the transition zone, where the gentrified boutiques and restaurants gave way to the rougher neighborhoods. During the day it was fine. At night, especially this late, it was a different story. "I live about 15 blocks east," Felix said quietly, still looking out the window. "You head west, right? Through Maple Street?" "Yeah," I replied, trying to sound casual even though my stomach tightened a little. "It's not that bad." He turned to look at me then, and there was something in his eyes I couldn't quite read. It was past concern, almost protective. "Mason," he said, and hearing him say my name like that, soft and serious, made my heart do this stupid flutter thing. "Mason, I've seen some sketchy stuff happen on that route at night. Let me walk with you." I started to protest, to say something about how I'd been doing it for months and I was fine, but he cut me off. "I know you can handle yourself," he said, "but I'd feel better if you weren't alone. Please." And what was I supposed to say to that? To the genuine worry in his voice and the way he was looking at me like my safety actually mattered to him? So I nodded, and we stepped out into the cold November night together. The first few blocks were still relatively well lit, with a few other businesses just closing up. We walked in comfortable silence at first, our footsteps echoing on the pavement. I was hyper-aware of the space between us, maybe 2 feet, close enough that I could smell his cologne mixed with coffee and the vanilla syrup we'd been using all night. "So," Felix said after a while, breaking the silence, "you've been pretty quiet lately. Everything okay?" I glanced at him, surprised. I didn't think he'd noticed. "Yeah," I said. "Just tired, I guess. School stuff." He nodded, but I could tell he didn't quite believe me. The truth was, I'd been quiet because being around him had become increasingly complicated. Every shift together was this exercise in restraint, in not staring too long, in not reading too much into every casual touch or friendly gesture. I'd known I was gay since high school, had even dated a couple guys, but this thing with Felix felt different, more intense, more terrifying. We turned onto Maple Street and the atmosphere shifted immediately. The streetlights were more sporadic here, some of them broken or flickering. The buildings were older, more run down, with barred windows and graffiti tags. I'd walked this route countless times, but having Felix beside me made me see it differently, made me realize how vulnerable I actually was on these late-night walks. A group of guys were hanging out on a corner ahead, their voices loud and aggressive sounding. I felt Felix move closer to me, close enough now that our shoulders almost touched. "Keep walking," he said quietly. "Don't make eye contact." My pulse quickened as we passed them. I could feel their eyes on us, hear their conversation pause. One of them said something I couldn't quite make out and another laughed. Felix's hand brushed against mine just for a second, and I wasn't sure if it was accidental or intentional, but it steadied me somehow. Once we were past them, I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. Felix looked at me with this gentle expression. "You okay?" "Yeah," I said. "Thanks for, coming with me." He smiled then, this soft smile that made my chest ache. "Of course, I meant what I said. I worry about you walking through here alone." We kept walking, and I found myself wanting to stretch out this journey, to make it last longer than the 15 blocks it actually was. Because here, in the dark with Felix beside me, I could almost pretend that this meant something more, that his protectiveness wasn't just friendly concern but something deeper. "Can I ask you something?" Felix said after a few more blocks. "Sure." He was quiet for a moment, like he was choosing his words carefully. "That guy who came in last week, the one who left you his number on the receipt. Did you call him?" My stomach dropped. I'd thought Felix hadn't noticed that. The customer had been friendly, obviously flirting, and yes, He'd left his number with a little smiley face. I'd thrown the receipt away as soon as he left. "No," I said. "Wasn't really my type." "What is your type?" Felix asked. And there was something in his voice, something I couldn't quite identify. Curiosity? Hope? I was probably imagining it. "I don't know," I said, which was a lie. I knew exactly what my type was. My type was walking beside me right now, making sure I got home safe, looking at me like I mattered. I guess someone who actually sees me. Someone who pays attention to the small things. Like what kind of small things? I thought about it, or pretended to, even though I'd thought about this exact thing 100 times. Like how I always make my coffee with 2 sugars, but I tell customers I don't use any because I'm embarrassed about how sweet I like it. Or how I always volunteer to clean the espresso machine because I actually find it kind of meditative. Or how I avoid walking home alone at night because I'm more scared than I let on. Felix stopped walking. We were under one of the few working streetlights, and when I turned to look at him, his face was serious, intense. "I know all those things," he said quietly. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. What? The 2 sugars, the espresso machine, the walking home? He took a step closer. "I notice everything about you, Mason. I have been for months." I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything but stare at him and try to process what he was saying. "Felix," I started, but I didn't know how to finish. "I'm sorry if this is," he paused, searching my face, "if this is crossing a line or making things weird. But walking with you tonight, being this close to you, I can't keep pretending anymore. I can't keep acting like you're just my co-worker, just my friend, when every shift we work together I'm trying not to stare at you. When I volunteer for closing shifts just because I know you'll be there. When I've been looking for an excuse to walk you home for weeks, because I wanted this, just this, being alone with you." I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. Everything I'd been feeling, everything I'd been trying to suppress and rationalize away, he'd been feeling too. All those moments I'd analyzed and then dismissed as wishful thinking, they'd been real. "Say something," Felix said, and I could hear the vulnerability in his voice, the fear that he'd just made a terrible mistake. "Please say something." "I don't know what to say," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "I've been trying so hard not to feel this way about you." "Why?" he asked, and he was even closer now, close enough that I could see the gold flecks in his brown eyes. "Because," I said, and I felt my throat tighten with emotion. "Because you're the best part of my day. Because when I'm not with you, I'm thinking about the next time I will be. Because this feels too big and too important, and I'm terrified of messing it up." His hand reached up slowly, giving me time to pull away if I wanted to, and touched my face. His palm was warm against my cheek. "What if we don't mess it up?" he said softly. "What if this is exactly what it's supposed to be?" And then he kissed me. Right there under the flickering streetlight in the bad part of town, Felix kissed me. It was gentle at first, questioning, and I answered by pressing closer, by reaching up to tangle my fingers in his hair, by kissing him back with all the feeling I'd been holding in for months. When we finally pulled apart, both of us breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. "I've wanted to do that for so long," he whispered. "Me too," I said. "God, me too." We stood there for a moment, just holding each other, and I realized I wasn't scared anymore. Not of the dark street or the sketchy neighborhood or the vulnerability of letting someone see how much I felt. With Felix's arms around me, I felt safer than I ever had walking alone. "Come on," he said finally, taking my hand. "Let's get you home." We walked the rest of the way hand in hand, and it felt like the most natural thing in the world. Like we'd been doing this forever instead of for the first time. We talked about everything and nothing. About how long we'd both been feeling this way. About all the little moments that had meant more than either of us had said. When we finally reached my apartment building, I didn't want the night to end. Felix seemed to feel the same way because he lingered on the sidewalk, my hand still in his. "So," he said with a small smile, "same time tomorrow? For our shift?" I laughed. "Yeah, same time tomorrow." But he didn't let go of my hand. "Mason," he said, more serious now, "I meant what I said. All of it. This isn't just, I don't know, a moment for me. I want this. I want you." I squeezed his hand. "I want this too. I want you too." He kissed me again, softer this time, sweeter. "Then I should probably let you get some sleep," he said reluctantly. "You still have to walk back," I pointed out, "through the same neighborhood." He grinned. "I'll be fine. I'll be thinking about you the whole way." "Text me when you get home," I said, "so I know you're safe." "I will," he promised. "And Mason, I'm glad I walked you home tonight." "Me too," I said. "Best walk home I've ever had." I watched him until he turned the corner and disappeared from sight, then practically floated up to my apartment. My phone buzzed about 20 minutes later with a text from Felix. "Home safe. Can't stop smiling. Sweet dreams." I fell asleep that night replaying every moment, every word, every touch. The next day at work felt different. Everything felt different. When Felix came in for our shift, he greeted me with this knowing smile, and when we were alone in the back room restocking supplies, he kissed me quickly, playfully. "So," he said, leaning against the counter, "how do you feel about making this a regular thing? The walking home together part, I mean. And maybe the rest of it too." I pretended to consider it, even though my heart was already saying yes to everything. I suppose I could get used to having a walking partner. "Just a walking partner?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. I stepped closer to him, bold in a way I'd never been before. Maybe more than that. He pulled me in for another kiss, deeper this time, and I thought about how strange and wonderful it was that danger and fear had pushed us together, had given us this excuse to finally be honest with each other, that the bad part of town had led us to something good. Over the next few weeks, walking home together became our ritual. Felix would wait for me every night, and we'd take the long way, holding hands, talking about our days, stealing kisses under streetlights. The neighborhood didn't seem as scary anymore. Or maybe it was just that having Felix beside me made everything feel safer, more right. We kept our relationship quiet at work at first, not because we were ashamed, but because we wanted something that was just ours for a while. But eventually people started to notice the way we looked at each other, the way we'd smile at private jokes, how we always volunteered for the same shifts. Our manager pulled us aside one day, and I felt my stomach drop, worried that there was some policy about dating co-workers. But she just smiled and said she was happy for us, that she'd been wondering when we'd finally figure it out because apparently it had been obvious to everyone but us. That night, Felix walked me home as always, but this time when we reached my building I invited him up. We sat on my couch drinking tea and talking until 3 a.m. about our families and our dreams and our fears. He told me about coming out to his parents in high school, how hard it had been but how supported he'd felt. I told him about my own journey, about the loneliness I'd felt sometimes, about how being with him made me feel less alone. "I think I'm falling in love with you," he said suddenly, and the vulnerability in his voice made my eyes sting with tears. "I know it's fast, and maybe I shouldn't say it yet, but I am. I'm falling in love with you, Mason." I kissed him then, tasting salt from tears I didn't realize I was crying. "I'm falling in love with you too," I said against his lips. "I have been since the first time you offered to walk me home." He stayed that night, and we fell asleep tangled together on my couch, the bad part of town forgotten outside my window. When I woke up with Felix's arm around me and early morning light filtering through the curtains, I realized that sometimes the scariest paths lead us exactly where we need to be, that sometimes we need someone to walk beside us through the dark before we can find our way to the light. And as Felix stirred awake and smiled at me with sleepy eyes, pulling me closer, I knew that whatever came next, whatever challenges or fears or obstacles we might face, we'd face them together. Just like that first walk home, hand in hand through the dark, finding our way by the light we created for each other.